Unfortunately, none of the plans I'm announcing today will bring any of them back. But it's important to remember them. The 17 lives that were cut short and all the hopes and dreams that were ruined have changed our state forever. Florida will never be the same. Today, I'm announcing a major action plan. I'll be working with the legislature aggressively over the next 2 weeks to get it done. This week, we asked law enforcement leaders, education leaders, and health leaders from all over the state to drop what they were doing, clear their schedules, and immediately get up to Tallahassee for urgent conversations about what we can and must do to make our schools and communities safer. We must take care of our kids. I can tell you that everyone said yes, and they came and they got to work. I've spent a lot of time in Parkland meeting with families and students. I've been there nearly every day since the shooting. I have listened to their ideas to make sure this never happens again. I also met with students who courageously came to Tallahassee to have their voices heard. What we saw in this building on Wednesday is what our democracy is about and why we live in the greatest nation on earth. My message to them has been very simple. You are not alone. Change is coming, and it will come fast. This is a time when I believe we must all come together and even cross party lines. Of course, we won't all agree on every issue. I do believe this is a moment when our state can come together around a common sense set of actions. I also want to encourage people to listen to each other and keep listening to each other. I've done a lot more listening than talking this week. Sometimes leading involves more listening than talking. I've listened to things that I agree with and to things I don't agree with. It's important to consider all viewpoints. I've broken my action plan down into 3 sections: gun laws, school safety, and mental health. We must get this done in the next 2 weeks. First, on guns. I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who has mental issues to use a gun. I want to make it virtually impossible for anyone who is a danger to themselves or others to use a gun. I want to create a new program in Florida. I call it the Violent Threat Restraining Order. This concept is very simple and very common sense in my view. This will allow a court to prohibit a violent or mentally ill person from purchasing or possessing a firearm or any other weapon when either a family member, community welfare expert, or law enforcement officer files a sworn request and presents evidence to the court of a threat of violence involving firearms or other weapons. There would be speedy due process for the accused, and any fraudulent or false statements would face criminal penalties. Let's take a moment to look at the case of this killer. This person was not stopped from legally purchasing a weapon, was not arrested, was not detained, and was never forced to turn in his weapons. Let's review the warning signs here. He had 39 visits from police. His mother called him in. DCF investigated. He was kicked out of school. He was known to students as a danger to shoot people. And he was reported to the FBI last month as a possible school shooter. And yet, he was never put on the list to be denied the ability to buy a gun. And his guns were never removed from him. We also strengthened gun purchase and possession restrictions for mentally ill individuals under the Baker Act. If a court involuntarily commits someone because they are a risk to themselves or others, they would be required to surrender all firearms and not regain their right to purchase or possess a firearm until a court hearing. We're also proposing a minimum 60-day period before individuals can ask a court to restore access to firearms. Also, we will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older. Let me repeat. We will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older. There will be exceptions for active duty and reserve military and spouses, National Guard members, and law enforcement. Next, we will prohibit a person from possessing or purchasing a firearm if they are subject to an injunction for protection against stalking, cyberstalking, dating violence, repeat violence, sexual violence, or domestic violence. We will establish enhanced criminal penalties for threats to schools, like social media threats of shootings or bombings. We'll also enhance penalties if any person possesses or purchases a gun after they have been deemed by state law to not have access to a gun. And we will completely ban the purchase or sale of bump stocks. The second part of my action plan provides $450 million to keep students safe. Today, I'm calling for a mandatory law enforcement officer in every public school. These law enforcement officers must either be sworn sheriff's deputies or police officers and being present during all hours students are on campus. The size of the campus should be a factor in determining staff levels by the county sheriff's office. And I am proposing at least one law enforcement officer for every 1,000 students. This must be implemented by the start of the 2018 school year. We will also provide sheriff's departments the authority to train additional school personnel or reserve law enforcement officers to protect students if requested by the local school board. We will require mandatory active shooter training as outlined by the Department of Homeland Security. All training and code red drills must be completed during the first week of each semester in all public schools. Both faculty and students must participate in active shooter drills, and local sheriff's offices must approve and be involved in training. We are also increasing funding in the Safe Schools allocation to address specific school safety needs within each school district. This includes school hardening measures like metal detectors, bulletproof glass, steel doors, and upgraded locks. The Florida Department of Education, with FDLE, will also provide minimum school safety and security standards by July 1 to all school districts. All school safety plans must be submitted to their county sheriff's offices by July 1st each year for approval. Once all plans and requests for school hardening have been approved by the county sheriff's office, in consultation with local police, plans will be forwarded to the State Department of Education by the school district to receive any state funds. School districts must also take all capital outlay funds received from taxpayers and use it for school hardening before it can be spent on any other capital outlay. All safe school allocations must be spent in accordance with the sheriff-approved plans. We will also require each school district that receives a safe schools allocation to enter into an agreement with the local sheriff's office, the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Law Enforcement, and any community behavioral health provider for the purpose of sharing information. That will allow us to better coordinate services in order to provide prevention or intervention strategies. We'll also establish a new anonymous K-12 See Something, Say Something statewide dedicated hotline, website, and mobile app. Next, we will establish funding to require access to dedicated mental health counselors to provide direct counseling services to students at every school. These counselors cannot serve dual roles like teaching or academic advising. Every student must have the opportunity to meet one-on-one with a mental health professional and receive ongoing counseling as needed. Each school will be required to have a threat assessment team, including a teacher, a local law enforcement officer, a human resource officer, a DCF employee, a DJJ employee, and the principal to meet monthly to review any potential threats to students and staff at the school. Finally, we will require crisis intervention training for all school personnel. This training must be completed before the start of the 2018 school year. The final part of my action plan includes $50 million in additional funding for mental health initiatives. We must expand mental health service teams statewide to serve youth and young adults with early or serious mental illness by providing counseling, crisis management, and other critical mental health services. We're also requiring every sheriff's office to have a DCF case manager embedded in their department to solely work as a crisis welfare worker for repeat cases in the community. This will require 67 additional employees to be hired at DCF by July 15th. Finally, we will provide law enforcement and mental health coordination matching grants to allow sheriffs to establish special law enforcement teams to coordinate with DCF case managers. Before I take your questions, I want to close with this. The goal of this plan of action is to make massive changes in protecting our schools, provide significantly more resources for mental health, and to do everything we can to keep guns out of the hands of those dealing with mental problems or threatening harms to themselves or others. I know there are some who are advocating a mass takeaway of Second Amendment rights for all Americans. That is not the answer. Keeping guns away from dangerous people and people with mental illnesses is what we need to do. I do know that some are going to accuse me of unfairly stigmatizing those who struggle with mental illness. I reject that. I'm not asking them to wear a scarlet letter, nor am I unsympathetic to their plight. I have a family member who has dealt with these issues. It is hard on them, and it's hard on their family. But what I'm saying is no one with mental issues should have access to a gun. It's common sense. And it is in their own best interest, not to mention the interest of our communities. Much of what I'm proposing involves giving law enforcement the ability to stop people from harming themselves and others, while giving them the tools to keep our schools safe. We know for certain that we cannot simply rely on the current federal background check system. The killer should not have been able to purchase or even possess a weapon. And we know that the federal government can't even be counted on to investigate or act on serious and credible threats, as we saw with the FBI's complete failure. It's obvious we can't trust the federal process, which is why we have to make these changes here in Florida. I'm an NRA member. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment and the entire Bill of Rights for that matter. I'm also a father and a grandfather and a governor. We all have a difficult task in front of us, balancing our individual rights with our obvious need for public safety. But of course, some will say it's too much, and some will say it's not enough. I respect everyone's opinion, and I don't ridicule those who disagree with me. An open dialogue is critical. But I will not accept the old tired political notion that we don't have enough time to get anything done. Government does not have to be slow or lethargic. And when it comes to protecting our schools and our kids, we need to be swift and decisive. I also understand that I'm proposing $500 million for school safety and mental health initiatives. But let me be clear. There is nothing more important than the safety of our children. Our kids deserve nothing less. Fortunately, our economy is booming, and we have the resources to protect our schools and our students. And if providing this funding means we won't be able to cut taxes this year, so be it. If we have to give up some of the projects we all hold near and dear, so be it. We are all elected to come to Tallahassee to represent the best interest of Floridians. And today, there is nothing more important than to do all we can to make sure a horrific and evil act like the Parkland shooting never happens again.
Governor, why do you feel 60 days is long enough to keep someone from a weapon if they've made a threat of mass violence?
I brought a lot of people up to Tallahassee, and I've listened to a lot of ideas from people. And I do want to thank everybody that came up here. I'm very appreciative of what they did. The way I'm proposing it is it's 60 days the minimum. After that, you have to go back to the court to get your right. If you've been Baker Acted, you're going to have to go back to the court to have the right to possess a gun again.
And do you think the 3 days that you're allowed to hold someone under the Baker Act is long enough to make a reasonable determination about their mental stability?
Well, we had a lot of individuals here. I brought up to talk about mental health issues. No one talked about how long they should be. The Baker Act should last. What my focus is if they are Baker Act, you're not going to go back and you're going to get a gun until you've gone back to the court and the court makes that decision.
We're live with Telemundo in Spanish. Could you just have a brief statement, not your plan, but your motivations today? Very briefly in Spanish.
Mis oraciones están con todas las familias, las víctimas, pues es terrible que pasado en Parkland. Mi corazón está con todos. Es muy importante. La Florida tiene un plan para prevenir el crimen de los estudiantes.
Governor, you said that you've done a lot more listening than talking over the past week. I know Senator Nelson has criticized you for not going to the CNN town hall. Is he politicizing this? Do you have a response to him?
Sure.
Saying?
So Bill Nelson is a career politician. He talks a lot, and he does nothing. Think about it. He's been in office for almost 50 years. Never done anything on gun safety or school safety, and nothing on gun control. If he wanted to get something done, what he ought to do, he ought to be sitting down and working on a plan to get something done. It's horrible what happened in Parkland. It's disgusting what happened in Parkland. Since then, I have been listening. I've been going around the state. I brought people up here, and this is a plan that I'm going to work hard to implement.
Governor, students from Parkland said that they were very interested in getting the AR-15 banned.
Can you start over, please?
The students from Parkland, one of their main things was they wanted semi-automatic weapons and the AR-15 banned. Can you talk to that as to, and what would you say to those students who are asking you, why didn't you do it?
Sure. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank all the students for coming up. It took a lot of guts. I'm sure that what they're going through is just, it's devastating. Talking to the families that lost their loved ones, visiting those who were shot at the hospital, you feel for them, and then the individuals that, whether they're at the school or at another school or in the classroom, it had to be scary for them. Banning specific weapons and punishing law-abiding citizens is not going to fix this. What we have to do is we have to really focus on the problem. We've got to take all weapons away from people with mental illness, people that are threatening themselves or threatening others. Let's think about the past. We had Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people with fertilizer. We've had people in New York City and in Europe use vehicles to kill people. What we've got to focus on is making sure weapons are not, people that have mental illness or want to threaten others do not have access to weapons. All weapons.
Governor, legislators are talking about.
Go ahead.
Tori Dunham, WPTV here. There's been this notion that's come about of arming teachers in schools. The president has mentioned it. Do you agree with that?
So, as you know, we had this conversation on Tuesday when the law enforcement came up. I disagree with arming the teachers. My focus is on bringing in law enforcement. I think you need to have individuals that are trained, well trained, and I think even when the law enforcement came up here, when we had our conversation, I think it was at the one later in the day at 5:30. Even what they said is that was second if we're not going to be able to provide more law enforcement. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we have enough law enforcement. One, we're going to have law enforcement at every school, and we're going to look at the size of campuses, but at least one per every 1,000 students. So my focus is law enforcement, but law enforcement do the keeping us safe and let teachers focus on teaching.
Governor, by not focusing on the ban, aren't you putting a lot of faith in the system? And didn't we see just evidence yesterday that the system failed with a Broward school resource officer not entering that building when the attack was going on?
You know, it's very disappointing what that law enforcement officer what he did. He didn't do his job. I appreciate what law enforcement does, and I see them quite a bit, and I know their job is to protect us. I believe that law enforcement will protect us, and I want to put my resources to the extent I can as governor of the state. I'm going to put my resources and making sure law enforcement has the tools to keep us safe.
Governor, you said you want to ban the sale of bump stocks, but what if people already own them? And would it be illegal to possess them as well, or just to sell them going forward?
My focus is I don't want anything, whether it's bump stocks or anything else that makes something automatic. I don't want to sell it.
Governor Scott, please address the question of waiting periods and expanded background checks, which some sheriffs are calling for.
Sure. With regard to waiting period, the problem is not the waiting period. The problem is the information that was out there in the background check. It didn't help them. I mean, the background check didn't work. I mean, so if you look at what we're doing is we're saying that my focus is making sure that by law, these individuals do not have access to guns, and we will work through a system to make sure that somebody, before they're able to purchase a gun, all that information is out there so they never have the opportunity to buy a gun, and it will be illegal to do it, and if they're ever caught with it, the penalties will be severe.
But under your plan, sir, under your plan, couldn't Nicholas Cruz have still bought that weapon?
No.
Why not? Other than the age issue,
Well, you got the age issue, and if you look at it, there are a whole bunch of individuals under my plan. They could have gotten a restraining order to stop it, and then that should have been in the system for the background check that would have prevent the sale to him. And then they could have taken, and Steve, the other thing they could have done is, one of the 39 times they went to his house, they could have taken away from him.
Governor, to clarify,
Go
Governor,
ahead.
you did mention additional training. Was that an endorsement of the Sentinel program in Polk County, where they are doing extensive training of school personnel and they are deputized?
So first off, what Grady Judd, I mean, I know Sheriff Judd, and I think he really focuses on keeping his community safe. My focus is on providing more law enforcement officers, not on arming the teachers.
Governor, can you clarify
Sure.
two other parts of two things? I want to make sure I'm understanding your proposal correctly. First off, you said 21 for all firearms. So I want to make sure that means, so any kind of rifle, any kind of shotgun, anything like that
All.
would be included in that. Okay, so,
Yeah, all.
And then secondly, you mentioned the school districts and capital outlay, and that they have to focus on doing school hardening. To that end, right now there is a requirement that they take part of the capital outlay money and give it to charter schools. Would your policy have that school hardening expense come before the money going to charter schools?
It goes. What my focus is on capital outlay dollars. The first thing is hardening, but for all schools.
For all schools? So you want
charter schools.
There's
So you're going to
been-
require charter schools to do this as well?
Absolutely.
There have been
So
some
Governor-
questions
Absolutely.
about the school
Go ahead.
resource officer and retiring, possibly having a pension. What is your thought on all that?
I don't, I don't know about any of those issues with regard. I know that we need to understand exactly what happened. I believe there needs to be a thorough investigation, but I don't know any issues with his retirement or anything like that.
What influence do the Stoneman Douglas students
So-
have on your proposal?
Hold on just for a second. What did you say again?
What influence did the Stoneman Douglas students that came up here and talked to you have on some of these proposals?
Well, I mean, God, my heart goes out to them, what they went through. But it was not just up here. I mean, just, talking to parents, either in person or by phone, talking to the students that are in the hospital, going to funerals and talking to people there. In this job, you get a lot of, you get a lot of advice, and you should get a lot of advice. But so, every bit of this, I mean, you take, having the DCF employee at the sheriff's office, that's something Sheriff Galtieri really, he has a program like that, which I thought made a lot of sense. But it's not one, I got a lot of ideas, and I just tried to take what I thought was the best and have a very comprehensive plan, because I don't think that it's never one thing to stop, right? It's not like there's one silver bullet that fixes everything. But I think you do all these things together, the more law enforcement, the sharing of information, the more mental health, the hardening, all these things together, it's going to make my goal is to make our schools safe. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Governor, have you spoken with Marion Hammer or anyone else from the NRA about your proposal?
No.
Or
No.
maybe your staff?
No.
Are you concerned, or are you worried that this might be going too far for some of the NRA members? And they've objected to raising the age limits and not sure about some of the other elements.
Look, I'm an NRA member, all right? I support the Second Amendment. I'm sure there's going to be NRA members that agree with me, and I'm sure there's NRA members that don't agree with me. But that's pretty much true with everything I do. I mean, there's people that agree with my policies and don't agree with my policies. I mean, that's.
Governor, did you
I'm a dad. I'm a granddad. I mean, as soon as this happened, I talked to my daughters. I said, unfortunately, in your lifetime, you're going to have to teach your kids about this issue. When I grew up, we never even had to think about this issue. Yes, sir.
So I just want to clarify, it's 21 to purchase or possess? So would a parent be able to say, purchase a gun for a child?
If they want to take so, as an example, if they want to go hunting, they can still take somebody hunting, but they can't purchase a gun or own a gun.
So they can or cannot legally possess a weapon before 21?
Cannot.
Governor, can you talk about high-capacity magazines? Did you consider limiting how many civilians should be able to get and have access to?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten lots of ideas from people, and my belief that the things that are going to make a difference are going to be hardening our schools, providing the law enforcement, coordinating information, the mental health initiatives. The big thing is we've got to say the people that have mental illnesses, the people that threaten others or threaten themselves cannot have access to a gun.
Governor Scott,
Yes, sir.
DCF has made mistakes, and the Broward County Sheriff's deputy did yesterday. With that in mind, kind of at the state level, do you stand by your call for the FBI director to go away for some of the mistakes they had in this, for him to resign?
Absolutely. I mean,
Can you follow up on that, your thought process in that, considering there's kind of mistakes at all levels we've seen now?
well, let's look at DCF. 16 months ago, they went and followed their procedures. This was a case that they're worried whether the mother was abusing the child, and so they followed their procedures. It's ridiculous to think that's the same as the FBI having a tip a little more than a month before the shooter, a very specific tip, and they didn't do their job. Right? Who's held accountable?
State and local law enforcement had several interactions with him, though, right? I mean, state
Thanks, everybody.